Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I am a digital marketing specialist here at United Training. Welcome to today's webinar, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification and What You Need to Know, presented by Jon O'Keefe. We are using the GoToWebinar platform for today's session, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with you after the webinar is completed. We do encourage participation throughout the webinar, so please use the questions option in your GoToWebinar dashboard for our Q&A portion after the presentation. United Training is excited to present this webinar today. I'll now hand it over to you, Jon.
Hi, thank you so much. Welcome everybody. I hope everyone is excited to be here. As you can see, I have a little bit of sun on me, which is very unusual for where I live. I am up in Western New York and we don't usually get sun this time of year. So my apologies as the sun kind of creeps across. I'm not used to having that in this room. Hopefully it won't become a distraction. My name is Jon O'Keefe. I am the Technology Education Jedi with Logical Operations. Logical Operations is a licensed partner publisher inside of the CMMC ecosystem. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. We'll cover that shortly. And I'm here as a representative for United Training, as they are a licensed training provider inside of the CMMC ecosystem. And again, happy to explain what that means as we go through this presentation. We have a jam-packed agenda for you today. I just want to make sure we get through everything. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat. And I can't see the chat, but we'll get to them at the end. Hopefully we'll have some time to answer some questions. So let's talk a little bit about the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or from now forward, we're going to refer to it as CMMC. We're going to cover three topics today. We're going to cover why CMMC and how did we get here, what is CMMC, and then the ecosystem that surrounds it, and then CMMC training, what you can do as an attendee of this presentation to start either your preparedness for CMMC or your organization's preparedness for CMMC. So basically, how did we get here? And I will tell a very complex story very quickly. We have a cybersecurity skills gap here in the United States, but we also have it all across the globe. Our cybersecurity skills gap is continuing to worsen. It is the fourth year in a row in 2020 where the skills gap has increased and not decreased. And 70% of all organizations are negatively impacted by the shortage of cybersecurity personnel. Okay, cybersecurity, all right. Well, this is a visual representation of the amount of ransomware attacks that have occurred since 2017. As you can see with the introduction of the WannaCry ransomware attack in 2017, we had a huge boon. But then, as organizations really started to get ransomware under control, 2018 and 2019 saw relatively few ransomware attacks. But there's been an explosion in the amount of data that's being held hostage over the last 2 years. Part of this is due to multiple new styles of ransomware. Part of this is due to that cybersecurity skills gap. And part of this is due to COVID-19 and people working from home, therefore not always being on the most secure systems. This is a huge problem in the world. Ransomware is a major factor. So we've got a cybersecurity skills gap. We've got a lot of ransomware attacks. Okay, what else do we have? Well, we have data breaches. And data breaches and ransomware attacks are a little different. You can think of a ransomware attack as someone getting information from you and holding it hostage until you pay. And then if you don't pay, they might sell it to someone else. A data breach might be personally identifiable information ending up somewhere on the internet, whether it be in regular places or on the dark web, if you will. So all of that is possible. So at this point, we have a huge cybersecurity skills gap. We have a lot of ransomware attacks. And as you can see by this piece of data here, we have a lot of data breaches. Now, Facebook recently lost 1.5 billion records. That is not reflected on here. And data breaches are occurring all the time. Now, there is one I want to specifically call your attention to, and that is SolarWinds. SolarWinds is a provider of services to many organizations. They had a patching process hacked, if you will. Malicious code was inserted into a patch. That patch was pushed out to about half of the organization's SolarWinds services. And at that point, hackers had access to those organizations' data. Now, that's all well and good, except for the fact that SolarWinds serves the Department of Energy, the Department of Treasury, Department of Homeland Security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the United States federal government was essentially breached through SolarWinds. Okay, so we've got cybersecurity skills gap. We've got ransomware and data breaches galore. 1% of the global GDP is lost to cybercrime annually, and that is a huge number. Now, you're thinking to yourself, okay, these are all large business problems. I might be a small business, I might be a medium business. Does this impact me? Well, of course it does. Cybercrime occurs at all levels. 47% of small businesses had at least one cyber attack in 2018. 44% of those had 2 to 4 attacks targeting them. That's not great. Now, here's the bigger issue. 65% of small businesses fail to act following a cybersecurity incident. That simply means that they either don't know what to do because of that skills gap, or they might not even know they've been hacked, which is a common problem in small businesses. So here's where we're at. Cybersecurity skills gap, big problem. We've got a huge issue with both ransomware and data breaches. We are losing 1% of our global GDP to cybercrime, and this is a big and small organizational issue. Cybercrime is everywhere. And on top of that, we have had, since 2013, now this number is higher now, 14 billion data records lost or stolen since 2013. There are 7.5 billion people on the planet. That essentially means that every single individual on the planet has had 2 pieces of personally identifiable information stolen in the last 6 years, if you want to do the basic math. That is a terrifying amount of data out there. So why do we need CMMC? Well, the first part of this is a rapid increase in cybercrime. But many of you probably already knew that. This is not news to organizations that cybercrime is an issue and hiring cybersecurity professionals is a problem. Well, here's the other end of the spectrum. Here's a number for you, $1 trillion, trillion with a T. That's like 5 Jeff Bezoses. That's a lot of money. That is what the Department of Defense has averaged over the last 10 years when it comes to a financial spend in both the public and private sector. That means every year there's about $1 trillion floating around that organizations can bid on. And this comes in the form of requests for proposals, requests for quotes, etc. Now, organizations have been bidding on defense contracts for the last 60 years. We live in a military industrial complex that Eisenhower essentially started in the 1950s and has continued on till then. And some of the most lucrative contracts out there come from the Department of Defense. Now, in the past, the Department of Defense has asked essentially 3 questions. I'm dumbing this down a little bit here, but essentially 3 major questions to any company that wants to bid on a DoD contract. And that is, can you make it? Can you do it? Number 1. So if they need chairs, can you make chairs? If they need gardening services, can you do gardening services? Number 2, what's your price? Is it a fair price? Are you going to gouge us? And this is how they keep competition in the marketplace. Usually they have to go out and get multiple bids, at least 3, and those bids will compare the price. Lastly, they ask, can you scale? So if we need 10 chairs, can you make 10 chairs? If we need 1 base gardening services done, can you do that? But if we need 1,000 chairs, 10,000 chairs, 1,000,000 chairs, can you do that? And if we need 7 bases mode, can you do that? So those are the 3 questions that most organizations have typically had to answer when bidding on your average Department of Defense contract. And that has led us to this point where there are about 350,000 businesses that are part of the defense industrial base. That term, DIB, is something you're probably going to hear a lot of. And you as an organization out there probably know whether you're part of the DIB or not. And you may know whether or not that's something that's interesting to you to become part of it. The DIB are organizations that handle FCI and or CUI. FCI is federal contract information, and CUI is controlled unclassified information as part of the DoD supply chain. Now, this 350,000 represents what we call prime contractors. Underneath those 350,000 are subcontractors. That exact number is typically unknown, but there are many of them. Some would estimate over 1 million. So we've got cybercrime happening, and we've got 350,000, by the way, international organizations who are bidding on federal contracts and are working with the Department of Defense to produce goods and services. One of those goods and services is the US F-35 strike fighter platform. The US F-35 was ideated back in 1995. So I want you to think about where you were in 1995. That is when this program started. There are over 1,400 different organizations that produce goods and services that directly tie into the production of the US F-35. And those 1,400 organizations, some of them are very large. We know the names, the Lockheeds, the Boeings, the General Dynamics of the world, the Harrises, the major players that are out there. But many of those organizations are actually smaller businesses. They may produce one piece of the avionics that go in there, or they may produce a specific type of bolt that has something to do with the landing gear. The sky's the limit. It takes about 1,400 businesses to put this strike fighter platform together. Now let's take what we know. We know that we've got tons of cybercrime, data breaches, all sorts of bad stuff happening in the cyber world. And we have a defense supply chain for this one specific fighter that encompasses over 1,400 organizations. So what has likely happened? Well, the United States wanted to develop the F-35 to maintain air superiority along with its F-22. And it wanted that because we wanted to have the best jet out there against our rivals. Well, due to parts of the F-35's blueprints being involved in hacks, because there are 1,400 organizations that touch this thing, the Chinese have been able to develop the J-31. And while not a carbon copy of the F-35, their development cycle was exceptionally truncated due to the fact that they likely got pieces and parts of the blueprints for the F-35 during cybercrime. Cybercrime, of course, being either a hack that was intentional or buying information on the dark web, etc., however you want to put it. So why CMMC? Here's the simple answer. There is a ton of cybercrime out there, and the defense industrial base is ginormous. I know it's a very important word, ginormous. 350,000 members plus subcontractors that are vulnerable to hacks, each of them potentially having federal contract information, controlled unclassified information, information that could help our enemies produce something better or faster than we can. So now we know why CMMC. Let's talk a little bit about what is CMMC. So in the past, the Department of Defense has put up a lot of different guidelines, policies, NIST special publications, self-attestations, etc., around cybersecurity. So organizations had a National Institute of Standards and Technologies special publications like 800-171, which is still current, 800-172, 800-53. They have had FISMA guiding cybersecurity policy. We have had best business practices around cybersecurity as the cornerstone of any business. We've had the National Archives and Records Administration, Department of Commerce. Each of these have best practices around cybersecurity. And of course, you have an organization where they're always thinking about security policies and procedures, and that could be your business or any business that's out there. All of this was attempting to guide our cybersecurity across the defense industrial base. However, the big problem that we know, the self-attestation model essentially reads that if you want to bid on a federal contract, when you enter into that federal contract, you as an organization attest to your cybersecurity policies. Now, if during the production of goods you're hacked, the federal government can take your contract away from you. However, that is more of an issue for the business. It's not really an issue for cybercrime. Cybercrime happens, it's over, and then you lose the contract. Well, that doesn't do anybody any good. So this self-attestation model, which has been the predominant way that organizations have been bidding, is really the problem. This is like if you are attending a party in high school and the cops show up, and the cops run into the living room and they ask a simple question: who here has been drinking? No one is going to raise their hand. It is the exact same way here. No one is going to raise their hand and say, my business's cybersecurity policies are actually fairly weak, so maybe we don't deserve this contract. We're talking about $1 trillion, organizations doing their best, etc. So the self-attestation model is what needs to change. And that is where the cybersecurity maturity model certification comes into play. The certification is referring to certifying organizations who are part of the defense industrial base, that they have processes and practices associated with the achievement of a cybersecurity maturity level. And this will be by 2025, in September of 2025. This will be part of every single DoD contract. I'll explain a little bit more how it fits in a second, but what we are now seeing is the following. No longer will there be a self-attestation model where an organization raises their hand and says, we're very good at cybersecurity, please give us this contract. All organizations that wish to bid on contracts that contain FCI and CUI will require third-party verification of their cybersecurity processes and practices. Essentially, what this means is that an organization that is not part of your business, a third party, will be required to come in and assess how you do cybersecurity processes and practices against a rubric of 17 different domains. At that point, they will assign you a level based on what you are doing inside of those domains, which I will show you in a second. That level can range from 1 to level 5. Now, as some of you are probably starting to guess, the complexity of the contract and the information that goes along with it will directly impact the level that's associated with it. So I'll give you more examples in a little bit, but as you can see, a level 1 organization is required to perform some basic cyber hygiene, while a level 3 organization is expecting to have their processes not only documented but managed, as well as have good cyber hygiene. And a level 5 organization is expected to be constantly reviewing and optimizing their processes and have advanced progressive cyber hygiene. So this is a huge change. No longer will an organization be able to raise their hand and say, we do this. Now a third-party organization will be required to verify it. Now I'll show you this again, and we'll discuss what is inside of these 17 different domains. But these are the domains that organizations will be assessed against in terms of processes and practices. As you can see, these are standard, typical cybersecurity and physical security types of domains. You have asset management, access control, incident response, security assessment. You also have physical protection, personal security. You have an awareness and training, systems and information integrity, etc. Now, inside of these 17 domains, live 171 practices that an organization will have to demonstrate that they are not only documenting, but doing such in such a way as to be sufficient. Now, at level 1, there are 17 practices. So level 1 organizations bidding on the simplest types of contracts, will likely only have to demonstrate 17 different cybersecurity practices. But once you jump to level 3, which is where most organizations will typically want to live, and you're bidding on contracts that are level 3 and below, you're going to need to demonstrate and document 130 practices. Level 5 is 171 practices. So it gets steep really quickly in terms of the practices that organizations are going to have to show a third-party assessment organization, which means that our 3 questions have now become 4. By fiscal year 2026, so that is September 2025, organizations that wish to be part of the defense industrial base and bid on DoD contracts that contain FCI and CUI, $1 trillion out in the market, will have to answer these 4 questions. They'll have to answer, can you make it or do it? What's your price? Can you scale? And then what level have you been assessed at? What level is your organization? Perhaps your organization has held a contract for 20 years, and that is the main income for your business, is this DoD contract. It gets renewed every 3 years. After fiscal year 2026, the next time it comes up for renewal, you will have to demonstrate your CMMC level by being assessed. It does not matter if you've held the contract for 20 years, 50 years, 1,000 years, it does not matter. There will be no tenure in place. Organizations will all have to be freshly assessed for this. So what this will look like in practice is the following. The Department of Defense will issue any number of RFPs in a given year. All of those RFPs will now have a level associated with them. That level will be determined by the Department of Defense themselves. They will be assigning a level based on the complexity of the contract and based on the complexity of the CUI and FCI that will be part of that contract. Now, a level 1 contract may be something that we would consider fairly simple. It might be a gardening contract for U.S. Army supply or U.S. Army base. However, that organization that has to bid on that will still need to be assessed by a third-party organization at level 1. That means that Dave and Dawn's garden supply shop and tractor repair that has held the contract for Hanscom Air Force Base up in Massachusetts for 30 years will now need to have a third-party organization come in and assess them against their cybersecurity policies and practices. This may mean to Dave and Dawn that they have their one IT person on staff will have to go through this process. This may mean to Dave and Dawn that the third party they outsource all their IT systems to will have to go through this process. It will depend on their organization and the guidance they receive in terms of the assessment. However, they will have to be assessed at level 1 if that contract carries a level 1 with it. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we've got a level 5 contract, a part for a super secret spy satellite. Of course, I'm being facetious here, but that will require 171 practices. Organizations that are advanced likely have in-house cybersecurity teams and can go through a mountain of training to get to level 5. What that's essentially going to look like is, remember, level 1, only 17 practices, but level 5, 171 practices. So depending on the type of contract you're bidding on, you're going to need to be assessed at an appropriate level. And coming back to this, as you can see, we've got 17 practices at level 1, 130 practices at level 3, 171 practices at level 5. Now, again, the contract will carry a level, and you must, as an organization, have been assessed at equal or higher to in order to bid on the contract. If you are assessed at level 2, you will be able to bid on level 2 and level 1 contracts. If you're assessed at level 5, you can bid on any contract. If you're only assessed at level 1, and then a contract comes out that you want to bid on and it is a level 3 contract, you will not be eligible to bid regardless of whether or not you've held the contract before. And all of this is based on this rubric of 17 different domains. And I want to show you kind of what a domain looks like. So I've picked the incident response domain so we can kind of go through that a little bit so you can see what is part of being assessed at a specific level. Now, the good news for Dave and Dawn is there are no level 1 requirements for incident response. A level 1 organization is not required to check any of these boxes off. But starting at level 2, organizations that want to be assessed at level 2 inside of incident response will have to show and document that they establish an operational incident handling capability for organizational systems that includes preparation, detection, analysis, containment, recovery, and user response activities. They'll have to show that they detect and report events, analyze and triage events to support event resolution, et cetera, et cetera. You guys can read, and all of this is publicly available. I'll give you the website at the end so you can look through it. Once we get to level 3, though, we're going to have to do some more things. We're going to have to test organizational incident response capability. So if Dave and Dawn's garden supply shop wants to bid on level 3 contracts, they need to have an IT infrastructure in place that can not only do these things, but document them and prove to an assessor that they're both documenting and doing that. As you get to level 4, we start to step up in complexity. So use knowledge of attacker tactics, techniques and procedures in incident response planning and execution. IR-4-100 is a little vague. And so an organization that comes in and assesses is going to have to use their assessor training to determine whether or not you're doing that. So as you can see, as we climb the ladder here, things get more and more complicated. So what is CMMC? The first answer to that question is it is the 350,000 organizations that are part of the defense industrial base are now moving from a self-attestation model around their cybersecurity practices and policies to a third-party assessment model. Third-party organizations will have to assess any member of the defense industrial base that wishes to bid on a contract starting in fiscal year 2026, so that's September of 2025. And if an organization does not achieve a CMMC level, they will be ineligible to bid on any contracts. If they achieve a CMMC level, they will only be allowed to bid on contracts that equal or are lower in level to their achieved level. All of this has to be done by fiscal year 2026. All of this comes in the form of a third-party assessment model where assessors will be looking for documentation around cybersecurity policies and practices and assessing whether or not certain practices are done in certain ways. That is based on a rubric of 17 different domains with potentially 171 processes and practices. So the second part that you guys need to understand about CMMC is the ecosystem, because CMMC doesn't live in a vacuum. CMMC has two major components to its ecosystem. The first is obvious, well, it has three components, but the first is obviously the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense is guiding this, and they are guiding it in two ways. The first is through the organization seeking certification, the OSCs. And the second is through the CMMC Accreditation Board, a potentially nonprofit organization that is handling a lot of the CMMC infrastructure. The term OSC likely refers to some of you out there. All it stands for is organizations that are seeking certification, meaning they want to be assessed and be part of the CMMC ecosystem. They need the assessment because by fiscal year 2026, September 2025, they want to be able to continue to or newly bid on DoD contracts that will have a CMMC level. There are currently 350,000 organizations plus subcontractors that fall underneath this particular scope. If you are asking yourself, am I an OSC? I have a great question for you. One, do you ever want to bid on a federal contract that comes from the DoD and get part of that $1 trillion? If the answer is yes, then you are likely an OSC. If you work with OSCs and are a subcontractor, you will need to look at whether or not you will fall under your prime contractor CMMC level. Many will not and will need to get independently assessed. So organizations that are seeking certification come in any size, any shape. They could be any business that's out there. They're the Lockheeds, the Boeings, the General Dynamics, the Harrises of the world, the Raytheons of the world, but they're also the Dave and Dawn's Garden Supply Shop that's held a military contract for 30 years to handle all of the maintenance on a military base. They could be any business out there. Now, here's the kicker. Many organizations are going to seek training to get through this process. There will be some organizations that don't want to do any training, that just want to barrel on through. But most organizations, like anytime you have a compliance mandate, they will look to do internal training to lock down what it is that they see as their path forward. When you think about HIPAA or PCI DSS or any compliance training, when you think about HR compliance training, there's generally a person inside an organization that is guiding that training, that has training themselves in the subject matter. So as an organization seeking certification, you may want to get training to prepare for your assessments. Now, the Department of Defense oversees the OSCs. That is their defense industrial base. That is their supply chain. They also oversee the CMMC Accreditation Board. The CMMC Accreditation Board, cmmcab.org, is a potential non-for-profit organization that is guiding the adoption of this certification. They have worked with the Department of Defense to create the assessment criteria and certifications for assessors who will be going into the OSCs and doing the assessments. They approve who is allowed to be a training organization, who is allowed to train individuals on CMMC. They have approved United Training. They approve instructors. So there is no instructor part of this ecosystem that has not been either provisionally or permanently approved to teach the subject matter, and that is all under one central body. They approve the third-party assessors, and they approve the third-party assessment organizations. So both the individuals who do the assessment and the businesses who wish to be third-party assessment organizations. They also approve the content publishers. There is no gray market CMMC content. It all comes from approved publishers. All of this means that CMMC training is in lockstep with everything that the Department of Defense is looking for. So if you are working with a licensed training provider and they have a certified or provisional instructor and they're using logical operations courseware, there are other LPPs out there, but I work for an LPP, so I'm going to say my courseware, then you are in the clear, and I'll cover that a little bit more in a second. Now, the other thing the CMMC does is they basically, they're the ones that govern all the organizations that are part of the ecosystem. The reason I put this here is because there's a lot of acronyms inside of this, and you hear these acronyms flung around. If you've ever attended a CMMC town hall, then you know it's C3PO, LTP, LPP, this and that and other things. And then there's other ones like DFARS and NIST, and it keeps going and going and going. Okay, so what does the CMMC AB actually have under their purview? The first thing, and the most important thing likely, is the C3PAOs. Now, as a Jedi myself and a big Star Wars fan, of course, the first thing I thought was C3PO, but it is not. It is C3PAO, and that is certified third-party assessment organizations. These are businesses who likely have assessment experience or gap analysis for IT experience and will be assessing any number of the 350,000 members of the defense industrial base plus subcontractors. They're organizations that are going to go out, they're going to go to an OSC, an organization seeking certification. They're going to say, hi, we're here to assess you. They're going to open your books, they're going to watch all your cybersecurity practices, et cetera, and they're going to, at the end of the day, give you a level, and they're going to say, you're level 1, you're level 3, you're level 5, you're level 2, you're level 4. And then at that point, you are assessed for 2 years, and you hold that level for 2 years, provided you are in good standing and are not the victim of a cybersecurity incident potentially. The second thing that the CMMC controls is the licensed training providers. So not any organization can offer training in this. Only organizations that have been approved and vetted by the CMMC can offer training. Great news for everyone on this webinar, as United Training is a licensed training provider. So they can offer you official CMMC training to start your journey towards those certifications. There's also licensed partner publishers, of which there are only a handful. Logical Operations, the company that I represent, is a licensed partner publisher, meaning that our content has been approved by the Department of Defense for any person or organization that wants to use it as official training materials. Finally, there are RPOs, and these are registered practitioner organizations. They are essentially the consultants in this world. They are organizations that can go into a CMMC OSC, somebody that's looking to get certified and say, yep, you need to do this, this, and this, and this. And that will be one of the ways in which you can guide your own policy. Now, the biggest thing here is that there is currently one certification available from the CMMC. There will be many more, and I will show you what those are. But the current certification is the base level certification, the Certified CMMC Professional, or CCP. The only way to achieve that certification, and I want to be very clear about this because there are many organizations out there that are not being forthright about their training procedures. And they're saying, oh, come train with us, you'll get CMMC certified. But the only way you can get CMMC certified is if you take a training from an authorized licensed training provider like United Training. That LTP has to use a provisionally certified or certified instructor. And that LTP, aka United Training, must use CMMC authorized training materials, or what's called CADM. And in this case, United Training checks all of those boxes, meaning that if you take a CMMC CCP class from United Training, they have checked all of those boxes off and you will be eligible to sit for a certification. If you go out into the world and find training somewhere else and they can't tell you that they're an LTP using a provisionally certified or certified instructor and they're using CADM, then whatever training you might take may be beneficial to you intellectually, but it will not lead to the certification. Okay, so we now know a lot more about CMMC, I hope. We know that there's 350,000 organizations plus subcontractors. That could be any number of you on this webinar that are switching from a self-attestation model to a third-party assessment model, meaning sometime in the next 4 to 5 years, actually less, sometime in the next 3.5 years, you will need to have a third party come in and assess you and give you a level based on your cybersecurity maturity. It's also, CMMC is also an ecosystem that includes training providers where you may need to get training from. It includes assessment organizations, consultants, publishing providers, et cetera. It's a robust ecosystem overseen by the Department of Defense and that is guided along by the CMMC. So we know why CMMC, cybersecurity problems, and our defense industrial base supply chain is essentially constantly under attack, causing the United States to lose its competitive advantage over its foreign adversaries. We know that CMMC is an ecosystem that was created by the DoD. that allows for third-party assessment organizations to assign levels to members of the DIB. Those levels will determine what contracts they're able to bid on. Inside of this ecosystem are licensed training providers, licensed partner publishers, organizations that will do assessment, organizations that will help with consultants. So now let's talk about training. What can you do to get ready for CMMC? You don't have a lot of time, 3.5 years. While it feels like an eternity, let's remember that we are almost 2 years into COVID, and we are 20 months removed from Tiger King on Netflix. So many of us are still mentally at the beginning of 2020, and we have already moved 20 months beyond that. So time is moving quickly here on all of us. So what do we do now? Well, the first thing is we panic. We run around the office screaming, and then we remember we are on a webinar with Jon, who's going to help us try and answer some of these questions. So number one, who are you? If you are on this call, you are likely one of 3 individuals. You are likely someone that is part of an organization seeking certification. Your business may bid on federal contracts, or maybe you just work for an organization that's doing this and you're in the IT stack and you kind of want to know how this is going to impact you. You may be thinking about doing assessments. So you may be thinking about, as an organization, that we commonly do gap analysis and IT services. This might be something that's in our wheelhouse. We want to do the assessments. You may work for that organization, or perhaps you're an individual and you've recognized that both guidance for organizations seeking certification and guidance for assessment organizations or becoming an assessor could be your next career path. The good news is I have an answer for all of these things. So if you are an organization that is seeking certification, here are the 3 things that I can recommend you start investigating right now. Number 1, if you have IT staff on premises, if you do the majority of your IT work in-house, you may want to get an individual trained up on CMMC. And what that will look like is an individual who gets the CCP certification. Remember, that is the first and only certification that is available right now. That certification will help any individual guide an organization seeking certifications policies on getting ready for CMMC. When you are training on HIPAA or you're training on PCI DSS or any other compliance mandate, it is exceptionally helpful to have someone who is trained in that specific mandate to guide your company policies. That is no different here. That is a recommendation, and we are seeing that out in the market, that organizations that want to get assessed are training internal employees with the CCP certification so they have an expert on staff. The next thing that you might want to do is consider specific domain training. Remember, there are 17 domains inside of this, and depending on what level you want to be assessed at, you may need to buff up your IT's incident response skill set, your risk management skill set, your awareness and training skill set. There may be areas where you're lacking, there may be areas where you're stronger. Certifications, things like CFR, CISSP, Certified Dark Web Analyst, CISM, CyberSafe, all of these certifications can help your organization make sure that when it is time to be assessed, that you are not lacking in any specific area. And then finally, the other thing that you can do if you're an OSC is look into CMMC Kickstart training. Kickstart training is not certification based, it is organization based. It is designed to help an entire organization understand the big changes that are coming from your help desk employee to your marketing team to your C-suite, etc., that will come in the next couple of years as you begin your assessment process. United Training offers all of this type of training out there. They offer CMMC CCP as an LTP, which means that it's authorized. They offer specific domain training, these certifications you see on your screen, plus many others. And they offer CMMC Kickstart training for your whole organization. So if you are on this call and you are an organization seeking certification, or you think you might become one, then these are the 3 training things that you can do. So again, to make it simple, this is you, you're blue, you have no identity, you're just a faceless person in my PowerPoint slide, and you work at an OSC. One of the things you could do is become a CCP, a certified a CMMC practitioner, and you could help plan your organization's CMMC strategy. The other thing you could do is look into getting Kickstart for your whole business. Kickstart will get anybody inside your organization ready with some basic knowledge about all of the changes that will be coming in the next few years. And then finally, if you're an IT and you're part of an OSC, or you maybe are managing an IT team, you can look and say, okay, where are we lacking in these domains? Those domains are publicly available at cmmcab.org. I have the website at the end, don't worry. And you can look at getting any sort of training that you might need to skill up to be ready to get assessed. Now, if you want to become an assessor or want to be a third-party assessment organization, then you've got the following options. The first thing you need to do is get your CMMC CCP training. Then you need to make sure that your business holds an ISO 17020 certification. They are currently giving a grace period on that certification. So if you don't currently have it, but you want to get involved in this, I believe they're giving 20 months right now to get that certification. Then, in order to become a C3PAO, go out and do these assessments, you're going to need to get a CMMC Assessor Level 1 and an Assessor Level 3 certification. That will likely all be the same person. These certifications stack. You get CCP first, then CA1, and then CA3, and then CA5 if that's something that you're interested in. With CA5, you could assess any organization. So if you're on this call, and this is you, the faceless blue void, and you want to be an assessor, what you can do right now, today, is sign up for CCP. CCP is your baseline certification. Next year, you're going to see CA1 and CA3 come out. We're not sure when CA5 will come out, but they are currently not available. As soon as they are available, training organizations will have them, and logical operations will write courseware. This is still a work in progress. They are not available. So if you want to be an assessor, that left box is for you, CCP certification. So regardless of who you are on this call, if this has resonated with you in any way, shape, or form, whether you are part of the defense industrial base currently, or you're considering becoming part of the defense industrial base, whether you manage an IT team or are part of an IT team, or you want to become an assessor or work with an assessment organization, what you need to start thinking about now is what training is the best fit for me. Everyone can benefit from this, the CMMC CCP training. That is a great training if you are an IT manager or you are looking to guide your organization's CMMC adoption strategy. If you work with a business and you want to get everybody else involved and do some general training, you can do CMMC Kickstart. And then finally, if you are part of an IT stack and you maybe work in incident response or etc., there is specific domain training out there that can improve your skill set to make sure that when the assessments come in, that you will pass those assessments and be assigned the appropriate level. And with that, I want to leave you with a couple of websites. United Training has, and I don't know if I can put this in the chat. Let me see if I can put it in the chat. Okay, I can't. I can't send it to everybody, but let me try and put some links in the chat for you in a second. But unitedtraining.com, they have both CMMC CCP training and CMMC Kickstart training. They have both on the schedule, meaning that if you want to start your certification journey, you can. If you want to get your organization prepped, you can. If you want to learn more about CMMC, specifically look at the domains and whatnot, you can check out the cmmcab.org. They are not a training provider. They are simply the governing body of this whole process, cmmcab.org. And then if you have specific questions for United Training, I put their phone number on there as well, 800-500-500. 3135. And with that, I will open this up to any questions that any of our attendees might have had.
Awesome. All right, so we have a couple right off the bat, so I'll get started with Julie. Will these rules apply to state level government contracts too?
If you are handling FCI and CUI as part of the defense industrial base, the answer is yes. Now, that's a broader question, I believe, Julie. What you're getting at is there are contracts that exist that are out there that are not part of the DIB, and how will this work? So, number one, the answer is yes if it contains FCI and CUI as part of the defense industrial base. Any contract that has that will have a level associated with it, and any organization that wants to bid on it will have to achieve that level in order to bid. The second part of the question, though, is that we're already seeing this impact trickle down into the Department of Homeland Security, who is going to adopt something similar to this. And the United States just issued a $27 million grant for the Small Business Association of America to begin training on cybersecurity maturity models. Not specifically CMMC, but a watered down version of CMMC for small businesses, because the United States, of course, wants small businesses to have some basic understanding of cybersecurity maturity modeling. So hopefully that answers your question. It's going to depend on the contract, but this is also starting to trickle out into the other spaces that many of you occupy as well.
Great question, Julie. We have another one here from Christopher. How will cloud-based and hybrid cloud-based on-prem infrastructures be assessed?
Oh, that's a great question. So they don't know yet, because you've got FedRAMP, and FedRAMP has cleared the way for a lot of vendors and providers for organizations that are part of the DIB. So if you're not familiar with what FedRAMP is, it's a way for small and medium-sized businesses to get onboarded with specific vendors that have already been cleared for cybersecurity policies and practices. The problem is that they don't know. They don't know yet. They have no answer for how this is going to impact FedRAMP. They are guessing that only one or two cloud vendors will be grandfathered in. And then organizations, well, this is interesting because organizations like AWS and Microsoft Azure and those other cloud services providers will likely need to achieve a CMMC level themselves. So that's a whole other issue, right? That we're not only talking about the DIB, 350,000, not only are we talking about 1 million subcontractors, but now we're talking about all the managed third-party services and vendors that are out there. So this thing gets big real quick, depending on how they choose to handle that.
Awesome. And then we have another one here from Andrew. In the event that a contractor misses the mark with their certification process, how often can they be reassessed?
So there's good news and bad news. The good news is that you can be assessed at any number of times. Once you are assessed, your level is good for 2 years, provided you're happy with it. They have not. We don't know the answer to kind of what you're asking, which is what if you have a disagreement? They come in and say you're level 2, and you really believe you're level 3, and you go out with your CCP and kind of show the CMMC AB. There will be a process in place for that type of scenario. So the ability for you to get reassessed, essentially. That process has not been ironed out yet. And what's interesting is that is a critical component of the CCP training, and there are 2 answers currently, according to the DoD. One is that the AB will have the final arbitration on levels, and the other is the assessor will have the final arbitration on levels. So we're still waiting for that to actually be cleared up. In the event that you are unhappy with your assessment, there will be a process where you can file a grievance and get reassessed. If the only thing I do know, though, is that if you are caught in violation, meaning you are breached, for example, you can lose your level, and then you have to be reassessed. I believe it's a year later. So if while you're holding a level 5, you're breached and they come in and they see what happened and they take your level away, you have to wait a year to get reassessed. But Again, that's all still being worked out because none of this is real yet. It's all in the ether. The only thing that is real is 2025 September is coming, and you need to do something about this if you choose to participate in the DIB.
Awesome. We have another one here from Sagnik. Why is the level of a contract selection up to the organization? If they later go big midway the fiscal year, would they be able to reevaluate their security and obtain a different level?
Yes. So, and that's kind of piggybacking off the other question, right? Is let's say you hit a level 2, but then you want to become level 5 6 months down the road. You can pay for another assessment to be done. Now, that's the key word is pay for the assessment. These assessments will cost organizations money. Now, that cost can be rolled into a contract, meaning that you can make it part of the bid, the assessment. And remember, you'll hold the assessment for 2 years after that. So assessment fees will likely be fairly large, which is why many people are choosing to go into assessment because it will likely be a very lucrative business model. Let's think about just the math for a second. If we take everything out of the equation, we think of 350,000 organizations, and how many assessors are we going to need to get through those in the next 3.5 years? A lot. So this is a huge booming ecosystem. To specifically answer your question, yes, you can move up to bid on a contract later on. But again, you'll have to pay another assessment company. You'll have to work that out with them to come in and do an assessment.
Awesome. We have another question. We have a bunch of questions. I'm hoping that we're able to get through them. If we're not able to reach your question, somebody will reach out to you after the webinar. Just giving you guys a heads up, just in case we're not able to get to your question today.
I'll make answers quick.
All right. We have another one here from Christopher. How will cloud infrastructures mixed with cellular services be assessed? Does this mean that, say, Verizon and Amazon will need to also be assessed?
Oh, that's wow, what a question. So I don't know the answer to that. I'll be very honest with you, and I'm not sure anybody knows the answer to that yet. Likely what you're going to see is the 17 domains being updated and moving as new technology becomes available. As it stands, cloud infrastructure, those organizations will need to be assessed. A lot of them fall under FedRAMP. Again, meaning they've already been tested for some of this, but we don't know how that's going to impact CMMC yet. They've not made a decision on what they're going to do with FedRAMP. At least the last time I looked at it, it's been like a few weeks since I looked at it, but I don't think they've made any decision on FedRAMP. So yes, large service providers like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, etc., who are providing those services to members of the DIB, they will either have to create separate entities that do that inside of their organization, which I think is fairly easy for them to do, or their whole organization will have to be assessed.
Awesome. Great question. We have another one here from Danvis. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Does this only impact company and contracts with the DoD, or does it impact private companies as well?
No, this is only aimed at members of the defense industrial base. So that means that you have to be handling either FCI or CUI, federal contract information, or controlled unclassified information. If you are private and don't do anything with the DoD, this is great to know, and training on it might be beneficial to you as far as cybersecurity practices, but it will not impact your business. If you produce goods off the shelf, and you don't bid and the federal government just buys stuff from you, then this will not impact you as well. This only impacts organizations with FCI and CUI, either or.
Awesome. We have another one here from Henry. As a help desk subcontractor, would this be something that the help desk agents that support MSP providers may have a DoD contract that needs to be certified? Not the actual agents, but the organization to which the agents work for.
Yes, so that means that your organization, if you're a sub and you're serving a prime, or many primes, for example, and you're providing help desk, yes, your organization is going to have to be CMMC certified. Now, that doesn't mean every single help desk individual needs to get CCP training. It just means that your organization will have to be assessed. So the structure of that will come, and the training for that will come from an organizational perspective. You may want to get a CCP on staff. You may want to put all your help desk techs through something like Kickstart, just so they understand what is going on around them. But yes, the answer is an organization like yours is going to fall underneath this.
Perfect. We have another one here from Dan Weiss. Is there a revocation of that CMMC in case the company is breached within the 2 years of their certification?
It says yes in the FAQ, but it's not definitive yes. So basically, the idea is that they want you to be afraid of losing your status. There's nothing that says you will automatically lose your status. The idea being, if you are breached during your 2-year period where you hold the CMMC level, the CMMC, AB, and the DoD can choose to revoke it. It doesn't automatically get revoked. So until the language changes to something more definitive, what I would say is that it is entirely possible, if you are breached during your 2-year period where you hold the CMMC level, that they may revoke your contract.
Awesome. I see we have just 2 more, so I think we can get through these.
Sure, I'm ready.
Do you see non-DoD and international organizations embracing CMMC or CMMC-like in the near future?
Yes, yes, yes. Also, many members of the Defense Industrial Base are international. As a licensed partner publisher, I do work with training organizations that are outside the United States, and there are many members of the Defense Industrial Base that are in Europe, Northern Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, et cetera. So this is international. And two, I would see that cybersecurity maturity models, the concept, which was started originally with the CMMI and now has become CMMC, it will trickle out. It is a good fundamental way of doing things. So I can see this being adopted by large organizations. And anytime you've got all of the big players in the world having to adopt something, it always trickles down.
Awesome. And last question here from Shane. Who do the assessment packages get submitted to, and RMF packages eventually make their way to authorizing officials? Would CMMC Contemporary do an AO?
Oh God, they have a process in place right now, and I am not a nuts and bolts person when it comes to this, but they are finalizing their process for the submitting of the assessment packages to go to that. And if you check out the cmmcab.org, that information is on their site because they have just finalized the process. That's one of the things that's been holding them up, is finalizing the process to submit assessments. So all of that is on the CMMC AB under their FAQ. They've just finalized that process. I know that's not a super specific answer, I'm sorry, but that isn't something I typically dive into. So that is a great question. The answer is on the cmmcab.org site that you're looking at right there.
Awesome. Yeah, I like how a lot of this is touch and go. It's, developing, it's new.
Mm-hmm. Well, we thought we would have a certification a year and a half ago. So, and now the certification is brand new. So this is all moving pieces and parts. CMMCAB.org is the governing body. They do a weekly or a monthly town hall. You can get added to that list. I recommend it if you're at all curious. They will explain things in a way too that may speak to some of you better than I can. But more importantly, the thing to know at the end of this is that your training options are available at United Training. I mean, United Training is a training organization. They want to help you. Anything that you could think of needing for this, they have, and they will be your trusted partner through this process.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate that. That looks like we're about done and we're a little over time, so I'm going to wrap up. Again, thank you so much, John. This was a lot of amazing information. I also want to thank all the attendees for all these very thoughtful and
Yes.
insightful questions.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, they were amazing. So again, thank you all so much for attending, and we will be sharing this recording with you in an email after the webinar. So if you want to go back, take a look at any of the questions, they'll be there. So yeah, if you guys have any more questions, please refer to info@United Training. And if you don't, well, thanks again and enjoy the rest of your day, guys.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.